Hello, and welcome to another episode of Untraditionally Traditional, a podcast with me, Brittany Duncan, a millennial homemaker. Join me each week as I share all the things I've learned that make keeping your home, garden, and life running smoothly, all while working. If you are enjoying the podcast, please be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcasting app so you get the episodes downloaded straight to you every Monday. Now, on to today's episode. Hello and welcome to Untraditionally Traditional, a millennial homemaker. This is your host, Brittany Duncan, and I hope wherever this podcast finds you, whether it's on your morning commute, walk with your dog, folding laundry, or preparing dinner, that you're having a great day. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me and listen in today. We're going to talk about being prepared for emergencies today. Recently, wildfire has struck where I live in Boise, Idaho, and while our home is thankfully not in the path of fire, watching it, smelling the smoke in the air has brought me right back to a few summers ago when our family cabin was in the path of a devastating wildfire that burned 129,000 acres. Thanks be to God and the amazing wildland fire crews that worked tirelessly for weeks and weeks, our cabin was spared. Whether it's a wildfire, tornado, hurricane, earthquake, medical emergency, job loss, part of being a homemaker is being prepared for the unknown. Preparedness isn't fear-based, it's stewardship. And while emergencies are scary, they're less scary if you already have a plan in place. We tend to plan and prepare as homemakers for things like holidays, guests, and new babies, but we don't prepare as thoroughly for emergencies. So that is what we're going to dive in today. Some of these things I've talked about in other previous episodes, so it may be a refresher for you if you are a repeat listener. First thing I want to dive into is financial preparedness, an emergency fund. No matter what kind of emergency you are facing, it may cost some money. Of course, there are emergencies we know are going to be costly, like job loss or medical expenses. Those come top to mind. But there are also unforeseen expenses too. Recently having our HVAC system go out, I can tell you that that's a really expensive repair. And while it may not seem like an emergency, for us, newborn baby, temperatures over 100 degrees, it could be considered one. Natural disasters may not come to mind as being expensive, but they can be. For a long time, Johnson and I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and we were no stranger to hurricanes. My husband, being from New Orleans originally, we tended to evacuate, or I should say I would evacuate. Most of the time that we were in Charleston, my husband was a first responder, and so he, of course, would stay, ride out the storm, and help the community in the aftermath, but he always wanted me out of there. Thankfully, we had family in New Orleans and North Carolina that we would often evacuate to, but if we didn't, we would have had hotel costs, the fuel to evacuate. With a wildfire, we learned with the fire at the cabin that you can be evacuated for weeks while they battle it. So you should have a fund that allows you to stay in a hotel or an Airbnb for a few weeks if needed. Financial planners will encourage you to have 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund, but if you're starting from zero, that can be really daunting. First, set up a fund, a separate account from your everyday spending. That money goes in to build it and only comes out for emergencies. Start with a goal of $1,000 and build from there. I'm going to be a little blunt here, so apologies if I offend anyone, but sometimes a little tough love is needed. If you have zero savings in an emergency fund and you're starting to build it, here is how you build it. You make sacrifices until it is built. You cut out the unnecessary, and I bet you'll be surprised how quickly it builds. A $10 bottle of wine per week, that's $40 a month. Your Netflix subscription, your Spotify account, that's an additional $22 a month. One $50 meal out a month, which these days is a steal. Your coffee out, buying lunch instead of making it. Cut all of these things and put that money that you were spending into a savings account. Hit that goal and then keep going. The easiest way to build that account is to automate the savings. Thanks to various ways to help you with this. So, of course, you can set up an automatic transfer, $50 a week or whatever amount, but you can also set up features with various banking institutions, like automatic roundup. Every purchase rounds up to the nearest dollar, and that money goes into the savings account. Cashback credit cards. If possible, get a credit card that gives you cash back and use that for all of your purchases that don't charge a greater credit card fee than the amount you're getting back. Be careful about that. Sometimes the cash back will be 2%, but a retailer will charge like a 3% credit card fee. So that's what you want to be careful of. And then treat that cash back, the 2% or whatever that you've gotten back, as part of your emergency fund. Transfer it into that fund. And the last piece of advice for building out the emergency fund is to sell what you don't need. Selling items you don't use is such an easy way to bring in extra money that you can put into a savings account. Facebook Marketplace is your friend because you keep 100% of the proceeds. Just this month, I sold 5 items that I was going to take for Goodwill just to get them out of the house, but I decided I would list them for 2 weeks. I was like, okay, if they sell in this 2 weeks, great. We made $122. These small acts and amounts, they add up. Next thing I want to talk about is taking stock of what is in your home should you lose it. This is the worst case scenario, short of losing loved ones or pets in an emergency, but it happens. Insurance is the lifeline when this happens, but as we know, insurance companies are businesses and they don't just want to hand over the money always. Sometimes you need proof, evidence. First, talking about the policy, you want to make sure that you have a policy that covers what you own on your homeowner's policy. This is typically referred to as personal property coverage. If you're renting, you'll often need to get a separate policy for contents coverage. Caveat is there is often language along the lines that says repair or replacement in a covered event. Make sure you know what covered events are. If you're worried about natural disasters, make sure your policy covers that. Sometimes, depending on where you live, you may need like a separate flood insurance policy or fire insurance policy to cover those kind of events. With these policies, homeowners or renters, they often will not cover what is referred to as sub-limits. So think art, jewelry, watches, furs, antiques. You should have a separate policy for these items if the value is over that sub-limit of your contents coverage. So how this works, an example may be that you have a jewelry sub-limit of $1,500, and then sometimes there's a itemized, they won't pay more than $250 per item. So if the piece of jewelry that you own is over that, either $250, or if it doesn't have that individual item, but the overall cap of what they'll pay out is $1,500 and your jewelry is over that, you may want to consider getting coverage on particularly valuable pieces. And I can tell you that the insurance for these items is actually pretty low. We don't have everything insured, but things like wedding rings or that kind of thing. It's not a huge expense in the year, and it's a very good peace of mind. Now, insurance is only as good as proving that you had the items. So the easiest way to do this, every 6 months or so, take a video of your home. Open the kitchen cabinets, drawers, closets, garage, sheds, and just take a video of everything. For the particularly valuable items like electronics, you may want to take down the serial numbers. Photos are great, but for the sake of time, I'd only take photos of particularly valuable items. Skip taking the photos of your whisk and potato peeler. Ideally, the first time you do this, you'll make a rough estimate of what it would cost to replace everything, so you know if your insurance coverage is high enough. There are 2 ways that policies cover contents. The first is ACV, which stands for actual cash value. This is what the item costs minus depreciation. Not ideal because you are going to have to replace your items at full cost, regardless of what they were worth when you lost them. Example, your laptop may be 6 years old. On the resale market, might only be worth $500. But if you need to replace it, it would be $3,000 new. I'd recommend looking for a policy with RCV, which is replacement cash value. That's the cost to replace the items, which, if your house burns down, is what you'd be looking at. Okay, once you know that your items are covered, you can start to think about what items you wouldn't want to lose, that you'd be just devastated. I'd recommend preparing a list of most important to least important so that you can grab the items in order of importance in case you only have time or space to grab a few. If your house is actively on fire, leave everything. Your life isn't worth it. But in most scenarios, you have a little bit of time to prepare. On your list, write the item and where it is so you're not running around in the emergency prep going, where did I put my son's keepsake box or that kind of thing. Keep this list on the side of your fridge so you can grab it when you go to pack your go bag, which I'll talk about now. Many people will say you should have your go bag packed, always ready. But I think this is unrealistic, especially if you have kids. Because if you pack your bag today, in 6 months, I'm sure those clothes and shoes are no longer going to fit your child. Honestly, with our diaper bag, I just had our son just had his first blowout the other day, and I still had a newborn onesie in there instead of what he's in now. So they, with kids, they're just growing like crazy. I think it's more realistic to have the list of the items that you want to pack. Same with food. If you put food in there in a year, it's probably going to be expired. So I prefer a go bag list. What every family member should have, including pets: water, snacks, clothing or the leash harness for pets, hygiene items, medications, important documents, and copies. So these would be your birth certificates, passports, driver's licenses, insurance policies, vaccination records, emergency contacts. Make sure you have emailed your home inventory videos and notes to yourself so that if your phone is damaged, you have a copy somewhere. What you'll need for the family could be a flashlight. Highly recommend headlamps, batteries, first aid kit, printed copies of multiple evacuation routes. If cell service goes out, GPS doesn't work, so you'll want to have these printed. If you plan to shelter in place, assuming it's safer than leaving, this is typically a situation with like hurricanes or tornadoes, I'm sure, where, given the timing, sometimes it's worse to be on the road than in your house. You want to aim for 1 gallon of water per person per day, at least. Factor pets into that too. Make sure they have their own water. And then food that doesn't need to be refrigerated or cooked. And lastly, preparing your home for an emergency will fluctuate depending on where you live and what season it is. Think through what you would need to do before a storm to save your home. This is especially important for hurricanes because you typically have 1 to 3 days to prepare, and it can make a huge difference. Buy boards for windows and cut them to size and then store them. So if you need to board your windows, you already have the materials. You're not running out into the frenzy of the hardware store. If you have the space, buy and store sandbags, which help with flooding and keeping water out of doorways. Think through the items that you would need to bring inside. Think about items that could be picked up by wind and cause damage. If you have a pool, you can put the pool furniture into the pool in a pinch to stop it from being picked up by wind and thrown into your home. Move cars to higher ground. Parking garages are a great alternative if you live in a hurricane zone with no elevation. Looking at you, Charleston. In fire zones, and this is a reality that I live in now, you want to store firewood, propane tanks, and other combustibles away from your house, ideally 30 feet. Keep trims limbed up a few feet and trim tall dead grasses. You want to rake the leaves, pine needles, and other dry materials out from under the trees and just around the property in general and remove them to reduce risks of catching. Clean out your gutters. One of the biggest misconceptions about wildfires is that your home is only at risk if the flames reach it. In reality, embers can travel a mile or more ahead of the fire, landing on roofs, in gutters, or in dry landscaping. That's why cleaning these leaves from your gutters and trimming vegetation are some of the most effective things you can do in wildfire season before it begins, really. Because if you think about it, you've got a bunch of dead leaves in your gutter, that ember lands in there, your house is going to catch on fire. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up with those things ahead of the season and through it. In harsh winter zones, food, water, warmth, those are your key focuses. Blankets and warm clothing are very important. If you lose power and you don't have a wood stove, you need to be able to stay warm and eat. Don't use any kind of gas heat source inside. That poses its own risk. Tornadoes and earthquakes are outside of my personal purview of living experience, thankfully, unlike winter storms, hurricanes, and wildfires, but my limited knowledge can tell you that you need to have identified your shelter-in-place spot in your home. You want it to be the most internal room, ideally without windows. Bathtubs are a safe place to lay. If you have time to grab something, water and a whistle are important in case the house collapses around you, that you can stay hydrated and make a loud noise to help rescue teams locate you. You might even consider keeping these items in your bathroom so that they're right there for you to grab when needed. Make sure you take them into the tub with you because you might not be able to reach the cabinet in the damage. I know thinking about all this can be scary, but the important thing is to start. Don't feel like you have to do everything at once. Emergency is unlikely for most of us, but if it does strike, being prepared will limit the turmoil substantially. As a recap, first, you want to build or update your emergency kit. Make your go bag list and identify locations of items. Save your first $1,000 for your emergency fund and make a plan of how to get to 3 to 6 months of savings. Check the contents and expirations of your pantry. Stock up on some non-perishables. If insurance will cover it, see if you can change your prescriptions to 90-day refills so that you have a few months of your medications at a time. Take care of your property and add seasonal disaster prep to your seasonal to-do list. Remember to take it slow and not be overwhelmed, but that today is also the best day to start. Until next time, happy homemaking, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of Untraditionally Traditional. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it with those special people who would love it too, and write a review. For more tips and photos of my home and garden, follow Untraditionally Traditional Pod on Instagram. Until next week, let's continue to make our homes places of joy and service to ourselves and those we share them with.